This is going to be a little bit of a different interview. Not because of the subject matter or anything like that, it's because of who I'm interviewing. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Representative Ken Pendergraft, Agent 29. He's running for Senate District 21, and we got to run him through the ringer and put him in the hot seat, and so we'll do that. So, Ken, welcome to the program.
The hot seat, huh?
The hot seat.
I,
Well, technically, the hot seat is over there, but
yeah,
not right there.
but I still get to push your buttons. So
Well, this is true. If I irritate you enough, you'll just hit the mute button. So,
where is it?
yeah, I don't know that there's that many people who don't know who you are, but in the event that there are some, why don't you just take a minute or two and tell our audience about yourself?
Um, my name is Ken Pendergraft. I currently represent House District 29 in Sheridan. It's primarily all within the city limits of Sheridan, which makes it kind of an interesting district. It's probably a little left of where I stand, and yet
A
there's
little?
enough people there to have kept me here. I'm finishing my second term. I should state for the record, because I know how much you care about this,
I do.
that I'm fourth generation Wyoming.
Oh, Lord.
Actually fifth.
You know how much that
But
means to me?
yeah,
Nothing.
that's why I mentioned it. But for those that it might mean, yeah, the family's been here since about 1876. Will tell you absolutely nothing about how I vote or how I think. So that's why we're here. But I do mention it simply because a lot of people say, "Oh, you Freedom Caucus people, you're a bunch of carpetbaggers. You come in here, from out of state, take all the out of state money." None of those things apply in this case. Anyway, I am a retired contractor. I've been in and out of the ministry most of my life as either a lay or a professional pastor, and cabinet maker, a bit of a musician, kind of got a lot of different interests. Made my living doing art for a while. I have 3 children grown and 11 grandchildren, and hoping maybe for a 12th one day soon, but we'll see.
11. You guys are prolific.
Well, if you can't beat them, you stay here and outnumber them.
Fair enough. All right. So you're running for the Senate now.
Kind of jogging,
kind of jogging.
actually.
Okay. So why the Senate? I mean, you could stay in the House, and my guess is you'd have a pretty easy race. Why make the move to the Senate?
Well, for one thing, you only have to run every 4 years. But another one, frankly, is the district is a little more amenable to me. It's a little more rural, has a little more conservative people out there. But a large factor of it is the conservatives, for the first time in God only knows, probably forever, took control of the House of Representatives. And we accomplished a little bit, but a large part of our problem was we couldn't get things through the other side of the building.
It
You know,
seems to be a reoccurring problem,
yeah.
not just here, but in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it's common, and frankly, that's how government is built to work. It should be hard to get things done, but it was a little harder to get things done than I would prefer, and several others. So a few of us in the House have determined that we're going to run for positions in the Senate,
Okay.
and by and large, those of us that have done that have made sure that we've had somebody that we felt could hold their own in our stead in the House, and so I've done that. And my best goes out to James Temple. I hope he does well in his race for District 29.
Okay, so what are you running on?
I have basically three things, and they're the same things that started in the very beginning. And I want a right-sized government. Government in Wyoming, with the rural population and everything, is always going to be a little bit cumbersome compared to other states. But we have far outpaced that. And the government, quite frankly, is just too big. And a large part of that are federal mandates or obligations to. We have never had the courage to tell the feds no, and we are addicted to those federal dollars. With those dollars come the strings, and those are the problems. Second thing, as I mentioned, I'm a pastor, and I want to champion traditional values. And what I mean by that ought to be fairly clear, but even the Wyoming Constitution states that it's the legislature's job to kind of be the moral compass. That's Article 7, Section 20 of the state. And I think that's important because I don't think you can have a free state like ours unless you have a moral people.
Okay, I agree.
And so that's been a push of mine, the very pro-life, very pro-Second Amendment, which kind of leads me to the third thing, is that I want to protect liberties because all over this country, both our First Amendment and Second Amendment on down, the 10th Amendment is under tremendous pressure. And I want to protect those liberties. I'm kind of a federalist. I'm also a little bit of a libertarian, which is kind of weird when I talk about the family values and those things, traditional values. But basically, that would label me a true conservative because by my understanding, a conservative is someone who wants to hang on to the things that work.
Okay.
And these values are the things that have built this country into what it is, and I would like to preserve them.
Okay, so let's talk about a few of those priorities that you mentioned. And again, this is where one of the reasons why I say this is kind of a difficult interview for me to do, because you and I agree on a great many things. But let me just press you on a few of these. You say that you want a right-sized government. Now, as you know, we talk to a lot of aspiring politicians on this show. That number is going to increase exponentially in the next couple of weeks, and they all make these general statements. Okay, I'm going to right-size government. I'm in favor of liberty, but those things are so nebulous that I don't even really know what they mean. I know what they mean to me, but I don't know that there's any specificity to them. So let's start with the whole traditional values. The state of Wyoming's history is not a Republican one. It's actually a Democrat one. If you read T.A. Larson's A History of Wyoming, there's several passages where Wyoming politics were dominated by the Democrat Party. We've had many Democrat governors, in fact, from 1975 all the way to 2011. I would argue that we had all Democrat governors. I mean, Jim Geringer was in there, but I think we could make a pretty stout argument that he really wasn't all that conservative. So would not the traditional values of Wyoming be more democratic than they would be conservative?
It's interesting you bring that up because I can go back just in my own family. My great-grandfather was first sheriff of Washakie County, a Democrat. One of his oldest sons was the second sheriff of Teton County and later one of the first game wardens in the state, and he was a Democrat. My own grandfather, who was head of the Game and Fish in the 1940s, Democrat. There are a lot of them. His older brother Ray was very well known around Worland, town marshal, whatever, Democrat. A lot of the meaning behind that, I think, has changed over the last few years, as everybody seems to slide left. The Republicans today have moved into where the Democrats might have been 50, 60 years ago. And there's also been a pushback, a pendulum swing, where we've watched things slide so far that now we want to push harder. And I think that's part of why we are as adamant as we are about a lot of things that we try to do, because we know you can't just gently push. If you want a right-sized government, you can't go in. It's very hard to cut anything. And so we were accused of slashing, burning, and bringing a chainsaw.
Yeah. Where is that chainsaw?
Just to get an opening position. And what we did manage in this last budget session was actually, for all of that, to slow the growth by a couple of percentage points.
Okay, so let me interrupt you.
Sure.
So the question was about traditional values.
Yeah.
Right? And so what I'm trying to get you to tell me is, what are those traditional values that you're in favor of? Because if we just make a general statement, and this is the problem in politics, as you well know, words mean things.
Yeah.
And the other side, they're really good at changing the meaning of words. So what are those traditional values that you are campaigning on?
Isn't it a shame that we have to actually define traditional values
It
and go
is.
through there?
Yeah.
We pushed for the What is a Woman Act. God created man and God created woman, and marriage is between a man and a woman. And boys can't become girls and vice versa. We need to keep boys out of girls' sports. There's a reason we divided those things for the sake of competition. And it goes on. Now, I quite frankly don't care who somebody sleeps with. It's not really my business. That's their issue.
As you
What I
as you often say, you're
Yeah,
not responsible for where or
yeah.
with whom.
What I care about is when myself and my children, my grandchildren, are forced not only to accept it, but then to celebrate it. And we are challenged never to say anything contrary. We can't say, for example, we can't quote scripture. You can't, if you get into a church now and you want to teach a Bible study, you better stay away from Romans chapter 1. You're liable to get fired in a lot of places.
Yep.
So I'm standing for those things that most people, I think, accept and believe, but are getting harder and harder to express without some pushback by some noisy ne'er-do-wells. It goes on to DEI. Just one thing that comes real quick to mind. There is a recent push for a scholarship program that is available only to Native Americans.
Mm-hmm.
How is that not racist? The
I think
only
it is.
qualification to get into the running is you have to be a Native American. You have to be that race. That's definitive racism, and those things need to go. You don't fix it by leaning to the other side for a while to balance it.
Okay, so thank you for that definition. I'd like to move on to a couple of specific things. There's a recent op-ed in the Cow Pie about sunbucks. And the title of it, I'm probably going to butcher it, but it is There Are Still Hungry Kids, Ken. Now, we've talked about that vote a lot on the show. You wrote an opinion piece that was, you may have to correct me on the title, was Why I Voted to Starve Little Children.
Yeah. Not my little kids, somebody else's.
Somebody else's little kids, okay.
So I have a warped sense of humor. I admit that.
Yes, you do. So I guess my question here is, in the Wyoming Constitution, it says that, and forgive me, I can't remember the passage, but it says we can't use public money for, and it lists a whole bunch of different purposes. And the last line is, except for necessary support for the poor. Mm-hmm. Now, we can make a pretty credible argument that those sunbucks are meant to help out those people of lesser means.
Sure.
Should we not provide that assistance?
There are many ways to skin a skinny cat. And sunbucks was an extremely inefficient way. They wanted like $3.5 million just to set up a one-person office, with $2 million of that being ongoing just to administer this thing. And all of that money expended before a single child was fed. Children, which, by the way, are already being fed by any number of other programs. And if you were really serious about feeding the kids, maybe instead of spending $600,000 on a piece of software, you just buy some food
You'd buy
and put it out
an
for
Excel
distribution. Which,
subscription.
churches do that. There are all kinds of programs. There are, I think, 18 counties out of 23 in Wyoming have summer feeding programs through the schools already. So it was inefficient. It was not a good way to be spending money, in my view. And in fact, the legislature agreed with me because the entire legislature voted it down. It wasn't just me.
No, right. Well, and the other point to that, I think, is that it is kind of preceding that op-ed, who, by the way, was written by a friend of mine. I think it proceeds from a false assumption. Mm-hmm. The reason why we feed kids lunch at school is because we've made a law that they have to be there 8 hours a day. And if they're going to be there 8 hours a day, we should feed them lunch. But the logic is, if you're going to do that, well, we should feed them all the time.
Yeah, in my day, I went to school pretty much the same time frame as they do now, but I took a sack lunch or a metal lunchbox. it's the parents' responsibility to care for the kids. Now, there are kids out there who are getting overlooked. Are they, what was the governor's number? Something like 1 in 5 or
Well,
something
yeah,
like
I don't
that.
know how he came up with
They,
that.
those numbers are ridiculous. I've looked at several studies on that, and it's more of a small percentage of 1%. And even then, how do you define uh, what is hunger challenged or whatever the term of the month is?
Well, and the other part of that too is the entire program provides $120 for a summer.
Yeah,
I doubt very seriously that you could feed a kid for 2 weeks on $120. Maybe with if you just sandwiches,
yeah,
ramen noodles, and macaroni and cheese, but you know anything more than that, it's going to cost a little bit more.
yeah.
All right, so let's talk about another one of your campaign priorities. You say that you want a right-sized government. So I guess real quick, one, can you give me a definition of what that means? And then I'd like to go on to a couple of areas where you've tried to do that. So first, what does that
Okay.
mean?
Well, essentially, what I think you do is you look at the Constitution and say that the government is required to do this. We need to have roads and bridges. We need to have a police force. We need to have those, public safety items. We don't necessarily need cameras at every corner. And where do we draw the line at that? Another issue that comes up is government, the proper role of government. We always talk about the proper role of government. It's not to feed everybody. It's not to provide health care for everybody. But those are the things that are happening, and gradually government programs expand and begin to invade more and more of our lives, and we allow ourselves to allow that to happen. We become dependent on that. And when the government becomes your provider, you're dependent upon them, and that's a very bad place to be.
The Wyoming Business Council. So you and we've put a lot of work into this. We've had the head of that agency, Josh Durrell, on this show
Yeah.
twice. He's
Had
been in front of
private
your committee.
conversations, public conversations.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about it. Here's
Had
my
his minions come and pull me aside and talk to me and try to change my mind.
Did they call you a Neanderthal like they said in that video?
They actually, a couple of them said they had never heard that had happened. So we had to educate them.
Yeah, well, we've got the video. All right, so the question is there a place for the Wyoming Business Council? Because you've tried to get rid of it, so
Yeah.
is there a place for it?
In my mind, no. And I am probably at a minority there. We are so conditioned to believe that it's government's responsibility to do economic development that we feel that that's a key role. In fact, some people think that must be the primary role of government in Wyoming. I beg to differ. But this is where the C word comes into place, where we have to compromise. So if we're going to have it, we want to minimize it. So it comes down to things like, should the Wyoming Business Council interfere with private business by picking winners and losers and giving out grants? Absolutely not. We should not be in a place where we are taking tax dollars and picking who gets it and who does not, interfering with the market in such a way. The compromise ends up being, okay, well, maybe we'll make those low interest loans. I still have a problem with that because, frankly, what you're doing is you're interfering with the free market. You're interfering with banks. Banks say, well, you're not really bothering us because we wouldn't have given that loan anyway. So why should we? And those are the things that bother me. I don't like the idea that we set ourselves up to invite a bunch of businesses here that expect handouts at every turn. Just many things that go on there.
All right, let's talk about one in particular, the Business Ready Communities program. Now, I think that it has a lot of flaws, but one of the things that that program does is helps communities build infrastructure, water lines, sewer lines, those sorts of things. Now, as we know, there are some towns in Wyoming where they just don't have a lot of business,
Yeah.
but yet people still live there, and they pay taxes just as much as everybody else, and so they ought to be able to have a water line to their home.
Yeah,
So,
within reason? Yeah.
I mean, isn't it beneficial to have a program that says, okay, in this community, we understand you can't pay for this, so the state is going to help you pay for this
Yeah,
stretch of water line to this residential
we do have
development.
a program. That's why we have a water committee, select water. We have a number of programs, and they begin to overlap. They don't. We asked. I asked how much overlap and how much cooperation there was between the Wyoming Business Council and the Water Committee, and they basically said none. And so what we have is two different groups that say they have the same ends that are not working together, and that becomes a gross inefficiency. And that's part of what's wrong with government. Yeah, there needs to be a program to enhance water systems, sewer systems in smaller communities, especially communities where, really, really expensive to try to do that. I don't really have a problem with that and sharing that over there. But what I have a problem with is by doing it inefficiently and redundantly. And there's no reason to have multiple organizations doing that.
Okay. All right. So another one, and this is kind of a bigger topic, and we probably don't have enough time to delve into all the specifics about it. But you're a member of the Freedom Caucus, and you're also the vice chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. Before the last legislative session, you guys came out and said you are going to cut government, and it's going to be these big, gigantic cuts. We're going to get rid of the Business Council. We're going to cut the University of Wyoming. There was a lot of things that you guys said you were going to cut, and yet in the end, you only ended up being 53 million under what the
Yeah.
governor said. So do your actions match the rhetoric?
Well, watch and see what we did. Our position, I think our first position was something like 300 million below. I don't have all the figures in front of me. We tried for a lot more than we got. Take University of Wyoming, for example. We tried to take 60 million out of them, which sounds like a lot of money. But when you look at their entire budget, it's only about 5-6% of their budget. We didn't have the votes to carry it through all the way. So part of what we did, I guess we would call an initial offer. You're going to go buy a car. You're going to shoot a low bar number out there, knowing that you're going to settle for something better than that. And that, in part, is what happened. The other part was to send a message to Wyoming Business Council, to the University of Wyoming, that we're serious. We're frustrated with how you're funded and what you're doing, and we're serious. You can't. I mentioned it earlier in kind of my opening remarks. You can't win this by just gently pushing, because they will gently push back. And what we did end up with, for the first time in anybody's recorded history, we ended up with a final budget number that was below what the governor asked for. Not much, but if we could just do that and hold our own for a while and let the economy grow around us, which is a whole nother issue, it has the same effect as cutting, but it's not cutting, and we didn't cut.
Well, there you go. Explain that last comment.
Yeah, we didn't cut anything. What we did was slow down the rate of growth. They asked for a 3%, a 5% increase. We got them slowed down to 1% increase, is essentially what we're looking at there. I feel that we were successful for no more votes than we had. I think we did an awful lot.
Okay.
I'm proud of it.
All right. Another one. So social issues, really. I mean, there was most of you guys are, by you guys I mean Freedom Caucus and the other conservatives in
A
the
lot
House,
of the
really.
conservatives across the state.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, and this goes back to your comment about traditional values, but there was a lot of pushback in the session on those. So, are you going to make any? I mean, if you're successful in the Senate, do you think you're going to be able to make any progress on any of those? Abortion.
Sure as hell going to try. I'm going to keep pushing. If you believe something is the right thing to do, you've got to go do it regardless of your chances of success. God told Noah to go preach, and he preached the whole time the ark was preparing and had no converts. And I'm sure that was depressing for him. But God didn't tell him, go out and convert people. He said, preach. That's what we're doing.
Okay. All right. So, real quick, let's just run through some of the like bigger ticket items, and I want to do just like a really fast question and answer. Where are you out on abortion?
Absolutely none. No,
Guns?
no exceptions.
No exceptions at all.
No,
Okay.
no. From conception to natural death, we preserve life.
Okay. So, what about like an ectopic pregnancy? Does that?
That's not really a pregnancy. That's a kind of a medical treatment. Um, I guess it would be trauma care. There's a term for it.
About life of the mother? I mean, I mean, they're rare, but I think
Okay.
that there are cases where
This
a mother could
always,
die.
yeah, this always comes up, and I think this is where faith comes in and trusting God to do His part and not trying to play God ourselves. You know, if you got 7 people in a life raft and you've only got enough food for 5, who gets to decide who goes? Well, I'm going to leave it to God, and I'm going to pray like hell that we can save the mother and all that. And I would also say, how often does that occur? How often
It's
is
not
that
very
actually
often.
the point?
It's pretty rare.
There's a minuscule amount.
Well, and the other part of that too, Ken, is that I don't really think that that is a question of abortion. I think it's a question of triage.
Yeah, yeah. You know, if you are an EMT and you arrive on multiple issues, or if you're an Army medic and you've got several people laying there, you may look at somebody and say, this person has a much better chance, and go take care of them, and they call that triage. But that I don't know necessarily applies to this case, because we have technology now that
It's a
pretty much
rare
save just
occurrence.
about anything.
What about guns? Second Amendment. Should we have common sense gun restrictions?
No, we should have no gun restrictions. The Second Amendment says what it says, shall not be infringed. The state constitution basically says you're never going to be denied the right to defend yourself or the state. And no, it's not about hunting weapons. It's about defending ourselves and our loved ones from tyranny, from any outside force.
What about energy? You know, we hear a lot in the media about windmills. We've got a guy running for Congress that he says no more woke wind.
Yeah.
I'm assuming solar panels fits in there. What about you? Do you think that we should have renewable sources
if you
of energy?
take renewable energy without being subsidized, I don't think we should give money to that, because you're just propping it up. If it's capable of actually producing some, I have solar panels myself, and take advantage of solar energy. I think that's wise. But to take I'm thinking. sometimes, and you know me well enough to know that sometimes what pops into my head just comes out, and I'm trying to learn to be a little more think before you speak.
Well,
No,
I'll give you a minute or two on that one. Let's talk about another one.
yeah,
So education. You know, we just went through recalibration, and money that is meant for the classroom has to stay in the classroom. But we're being told that, you know, that's going to affect a lot of activities. So, you know, should we have a football team? Should we have a basketball team? Should we have any
yeah.
activities?
And my answer is, if you can afford them, they have some value, and that's fine. But what needs to come first is the classroom, and that's what we did with these. After trying several times to gently persuade school districts on what the right direction was, the problem, in my view, is fundamentally, I don't believe government ever should have been given the responsibility to educate our children. That's the responsibility of the parents. It's the responsibility of the families. And yes, there are some families that won't, or they say can't do that. I could argue those points, but and we're not going to get rid of public education. But what we need to do is push it back to where it needs to be. I saw a candidate in Casper who put up a couple of posts here just over the last couple of days, bragging about how great the state of Wyoming's education was, because we were so many percentage points above the national average. Well, the national average is about 40 to 45% success rate. And so Wyoming in math is below 50%. In science is below 50%. Actually, about 41% is all. And in language arts, something like 52% of kids that come out of the school are proficient. That's not success.
In the beginning of our discussion today, you said that you're a conservative.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a difference between being a conservative and being a Republican? And if so, what is that difference?
Well, ideally, in my mind, being a Republican should automatically mean that you're a conservative. If you look at the Republican Party platform, it has conservative planks. It talks about timeless truths. It talks about life. It talks about the Second Amendment, all of these things that we've talked about and that I agree with. What it has become now, because Wyoming has become kind of a one-party state, is Republican means I actually want to get elected at some point. And everything else is whatever. It's all become relative, and words mean less and less all the time. The more they're co-opted.
Okay. All right. So, last question I have for you.
Oh, the last one
Well, I mean, we could go on for hours.
we have.
On occasion, we have. This
Yeah.
is true. So, again, you're a member of the Freedom Caucus, and there are some in the media. I've seen a lot of discussions online. But basically, the thrust is if you are a member of the Freedom Caucus, well, then you just have to go, and you have this big giant red target on your back. So, what would you like? How do you respond to that criticism that you guys are just hacking and slashing, and that you're just too conservative, and that the Freedom Caucus has to go?
I think the best way to respond is with facts. You being to educate, but you can challenge somebody that comes up to you and says, "Oh, they got Freedom Caucus
Derangement
syndrome." And you can challenge them and say, "Well, what actual actions have I taken?" And I've never had anybody lay one out there.
No.
Usually, the objections come down to, "Well, I don't like your style." Well, okay, that's your prerogative, but look at what we've done and look what we're trying to accomplish. And recently, as you know, I chaired the resolutions committee where grassroots Republicans all over the state got together and talked about resolutions. What is it that we want the legislature to do? What do we want them to care about? And the things that they listed overwhelmingly are precisely the things that we have been working on for the last several years. And the idea that I am or am not Freedom Caucus really is irrelevant. For the first several years I was invited and didn't join. I did join because it's easier for communication and to get information, which is important. But that label doesn't mean as much to me as the values that they stand for.
I always do this. I say last question, and then invariably when whomever I'm interviewing starts, I'm like, oh wait, I have one more. So the actual last question I have is: you have an opponent already, though I don't know that she's filed to run for office. Why should Senate District 21 citizens vote for you over your opponent?
I would say primarily because you know what you're getting. You're getting someone who has proven effective and has proven willing to fight for the things that I believe you care about. And if there aren't enough people that care about those things, I wouldn't be that representative. But I'm going to go there with everything that I've got and be as effective as I possibly can. At the end of the beginning of my second term, I had earned enough confidence in the leadership of the House to be, I guess you would call it, appointed the vice chair of appropriations. That's pretty rare.
Yeah.
That somebody gets that kind of leverage that early.
Certainly for a second term representative.
And I think, how do you determine it was effective? I think you have to look at the flak. The flak is always heaviest when you're over the target. There are very few people around here that don't know who I am. And you've got a lot of people that go to Cheyenne and just kind of move along with the shuffle, and you really don't know much about what they did. You're going to know what I think. You're going to know what I care about, and all that's right out in the open.
All right, Ken, I appreciate you sitting down for a few minutes to visit with me. If people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Well, I understand there's a website out there called kenpendergraft.com, and there's information there. You can go to wildleg.gov and look up my profile there. My phone number there is 307-461-2436. The only phone number I have, that's my personal number, that's whatever. And I'll be frank, I get a lot of phone calls. And I respond to as many of them as possible. Somebody the other day said, I respond to every single one of them. I can't probably say that. um, if I don't know who the number is or my phone doesn't know who it is, there chances are you'll go to voicemail. But I will call you back.
Okay, Ken, I appreciate it.